Okay, so today I use ChatGPT to put together a little piece of software that then I have turned into a web page for me to practice. And this is an exercise that I used to do years ago and is based off an exercise of the book The Advancing Guitarist by Mick Goodrick. If you've never heard of that book, check it out. It's probably one of the most famous, more creative jazz books out there. And the exercise basically, at the time you had to write these the individual chords in every key on a piece of paper, on a little piece of paper, put it in a hat, and just then by taking random pieces of paper with different random chords, you would create a chord progression and then put together a chord progression, record it, and then sum over. So now, obviously, in 2023, we have ChatGPT, and I've created this prompt where, because I code a little bit, I understand both making web pages and coding to a certain extent with different languages like JavaScript, Python, and C++. So I can work around those languages. So I created a prompt for ChatGPT. Um, so I created a prompt for ChatGPT. I'm going to read it now. You can see it on the screen. This is probably like the third or fourth prompt, as you can see, starts with nearly there. So basically, the idea is to create a random chord progression made of X amount of chords within, obviously, because I want to practice jazz and I want that to look a bit like a lead sheet, so to speak, a page from the real book. It will be a type of seventh chord, major 7, minor 7, and all that. It's not really detailed, let's say, for dominant 7. Like here, you can see I put altered rather than having flat 9, sharp 5, all the combinations. So you can just play whatever you want. So that has a certain amount of chords. And basically, this is the prompt. Can you give me the code for a program that has these features? As an input box to ask how many chords in the progression, and then I call a variable. A variable is obviously part of the code. Chords num. This is in what's called camel case, where you have, the first letter of each word capitalized. So then, the second point is create. It creates a random combination of chords on the same page by clicking the button "Create Chord Progression." The chord progression will be created with a chords num amount of chords, one chord per bar, chords separated by a line just to make it into bars, basically to separate the chords. The chord progression should start and end with the bar line. And again, sometimes it does it. Sometimes this is the only thing that I've not been able to get consistently correct. But I'm happy with what I've come up with so far. Chords are picked at random from this selection, and then I have a selection of seventh chords, and then replace each time the X with a different root note from the chromatic scale, including sharps and flats. Point 5, add a line break after 4 chords, again, to make it look a bit like a chart. Print the results on the same page so that each bar aligns vertically and there is some space in between lines. This is to do with CSS, like the alignment of the pages. And again, this is a bit inconsistent. I have to say, maybe I should spend a bit more time wording this prompt, but I'm happy with this. This is more than enough for me. Each bar should be 12 characters wide. And this is all to do with the CSS. And then the last one, the code should be only one HTML page, including JavaScript and basic CSS for styling. Align the old page left, use arrow font. This is stuff that obviously, I can add, but it's not really necessary. And he came up with this code and some notes there. And obviously the code, I copied the code, put it into a notepad type software, and I saved it as an HTML page, which is this. And very simple, nothing crazy. But as I said, for now, I was just interested in the process. So that if I want to style it and make it look cool, then I can do that in a second, another time. So let's say I want an 8-bar chord progression. And if I click here, it will give me basically 8 chords, one per bar, and it's just a random combination. I'll create another one, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one. Okay, so these are completely random. This is not really a tune. This is for me to create that the process that while I'm sight reading, the first thing is for me to get the process of seeing a chord and in the first half of the exercise, play that chord shape. So I have 4 beats to look ahead and sight read the next chord, okay, and find it on the guitar. Then obviously I start the looper and I have the same amount of time to figure out what the chord requires as a scale and just play, improvise of it, like learn to connect random chords. You'd be surprised actually. I used to do this all the time decades ago, and I mean, not decades, like years ago, and you'd be surprised that sometimes you hear really interesting chord progression that you would not really come up with. And if you just keep a little diary of these chord progressions, these random chord progressions, you will come up with some interesting ideas. If you then add the rhythm to that, interesting ideas for like original tunes. So then the next step, now I'm going to stop this and I'm going to get the looper out and the guitar out, and I'm going to try and just come up with a couple of chord progressions and show you how I use this. There's a different way to use this as well, which is not about sight reading, it's about ear training. To, let's say, record this rather than with a looper, record this with a software, and then let's say forget about that. Save the file, save it as an MP3 or audio file, and then after a week when you've completely forgotten, or even after a day when you've completely forgotten what you've played, you play it back, and without looking at the chords, you try to figure out the chords, meaning like you try to recognize the type of chord by ear, and you try by ear to find your way and improvise through those chords. That's a really good ear training exercise that is a bit detached from just like figuring out the keys. Obviously, stuff that is a bit advanced, but you'd be surprised even at a beginner's level, even if you find just one, just create like a random combination of chords and try and just to find the chord shapes. You will learn a lot. Obviously, this is not something you have to spend tons of time on, but even if you do it like once a week for half an hour, this is something that I found is quite an interesting process, because obviously it takes you away from patterns of chords and combination of chords that are like the same stuff. Especially if you play jazz and you play standards a lot, you recognize 2-5-1s, 1-6-2-5s, and blues chord progressions and stuff like that. After a while, it becomes all a bit a bit samey in a way. So this kind of takes you a bit away from that, so you can find different solutions for when you get to a chord, so to speak. Excellent. So yeah, as I said, I'm going to get the guitar out. I'm going to try some of these now. Okay, so we are now on the page of the random chord progression generator. I'm going to click on the generate button, and then I'm going to record it on the looper, and I'm going to try and improvise over that. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, yeah. I mean, these chords are quite far from each other, so obviously some of this stuff might not make so much sense musically. But I actually quite like the first, the A7 altered on that D flat major 7. I quite like that first line, especially the first three chords. Could be, if you put a groove to it, it could be some kind of Steely Dan kind of chord progression. Okay, let's try a different chord progression. Let's try maybe something like a bossa nova kind of vibe. Click on the generate. Here we go. Okay, so you see, it's quite tricky, but I'd say it's not too difficult to find the notes, so to speak. It's difficult to make it sound musical in a way. So let me have another go at this last chord progression, and I'm going to try and just use very, very few notes. Okay. Okay, well, that's the best I can do for now. I think I need to practice a bit more. So I'm going to keep going with this. Maybe just make a habit of it and just do a few minutes a day, just to get back to that ability to just see a chord, play the right chord, and then find the right notes and make some music out of it. And again, as I said, you might find the odd good 3 or 4 chords together to write something original as well. Okay, I hope that helped. I'm going to leave the prompt for ChatGPT in the description. If you want, maybe just leave a message if you want me to create this as an HTML page and to leave it on my website. So as always, if you could just subscribe and share and all that, I'd be appreciated. Take care. Bye-bye.